Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah wa barakatuh. We had a couple of questions come up today. One of them was, um, we talk about marriage and marriage and the path and the relationship between marriage and God. And the other one was, uh, it seems that the politics in the United States have become radicalized on the left and on the right. And so, how do you keep your senses among all these um, extreme competing forces? Inshallah, we'll try to incorporate answers to those in today's talk. There's a word in the English language usually used to describe excessive drug interaction. It's called overdose. It means you take too much of something. In the case of an overdose, it means too much of a certain drug, enough to get you to the point of near death and sometimes death. Which brings us to the topic of excess and being able to control excess in our lives. Excess desire leads to a kind of stupor, which leads to a sense of intoxication. It makes people almost drunk because they become so one-sided in what it is that they desire. Too much talking leads to destruction. It harms you and it harms everyone around you. We have to learn to deal with desire in a way that it doesn't overwhelm us. And unfortunately, for many people, desire is an integral part of their life. They have a desire and then they react to the desire. Desire becomes the initiative for most things that occur. And this desire has to be brought under control, and excess has to be brought under control. Unfortunately, in the world today, excess seems to be the way most things go. Religious fanaticism is excess. Political fanaticism is excess. Any kind of fanaticism is because of an excess in your attachment to that specific thing. As people, we are either internal or external beings. An empty ship gets pushed around by the wind and will go in many, many different directions. And finally, it'll be pushed over altogether. But a ship that's full will have a certain balance to it and can't be pushed around. Man, if he is empty, if he is constantly only reacting to his desires, will be pushed around by his desires, by his mind, by all of the meanderings of the mind and the thought process. But if your heart has been made clean, and if you fill your heart with certitude, faith, and determination, and create a space for God to reside within you, you become full. And when you become full, you can't be pushed around. So, in our dealings with the world, in our dealings with politics, in our dealings with all of the excess and fanaticism that we are surrounded by, we have to find a place where they don't affect us. So, one of the aspects that we have to understand is what non attachment means. People are influenced by the opinions around them. And so those opinions pull them and push them. But why are they influenced by the opinions around them? Because they have not formulated a strong center. They haven't formulated an inner cohesion that knows the difference between right and wrong and doesn't react to what's going on outside. So if somebody comes at you with a bombardment of crazy ideas, it may make you very upset because you can't believe people can come up with these kinds of things or hold these kinds of opinions. Well, don't get upset because people can come up with crazy ideas and hold crazy opinions. And it seems to be the norm as opposed to not being the norm. But that doesn't mean that it has to affect us. That doesn't mean that we have to react to it. So, one of the very important things on this path is learning how not to react, and how not to become uh, upset, put into turmoil, thrown upside down by the fact that we have crazy people around us. The world is made up of crazy people. Most of the people in the world have opinions that don't reach the level of wisdom. Religion, which everyone thinks is like a penultimate um, uh, consciousness, is only at the third level of consciousness. Religion only goes up to intellect. Religion only goes up to the mind. Most people are working with the mind. To enter into wisdom and to enter into divine consciousness, into consciousness that transcends this world, we have to go beyond mind and desire, and we have to deal from the heart. But we have to have a heart that contains truth, and the heart can only contain truth if it contains God, and the heart can only contain God if we have prepared ourselves to be a receptacle for God. And we can only prepare ourselves to be a receptacle for God by surrendering to God. The interesting thing is, what does surrender mean in this case? Well, to surrender to God means to become like God. It's not that you give up, it's that you join. And God, in his mercy towards men, has made what he expects of you to be the highest possible thing you can do. What he expects for you is gaining the largest possible treasure that is available in this lifetime and in the next lifetime, which is to be with him and of him. So when we become like him, we become centered. We have no jealousy, we have no anger, We have no needs because everything is already there for us. We are complete within ourselves. It's when we are incomplete that these difficulties arise because we're trying to fill the emptiness of being incomplete. God's qualities are complete. All of our opinions that are not based in mercy and compassion and justice are incomplete, which means they're empty. They have no weight. And like the ship, you'll get pushed around. So if you're carrying opinions that aren't just, if you're carrying opinions that aren't compassionate, if you're carrying opinions that don't have love involved in them, they're empty opinions. There's no reality to them. They're worldly in nature, and they're going to be subject to change and constant alteration. But truth doesn't change. Mercy doesn't change. Compassion doesn't change. God doesn't change. Equality doesn't change. It remains eternal and the same and is without form, which means it also isn't attached to results, isn't attached to desire, isn't attached to the mind, isn't driven by what you think you want, and doesn't lead to disappointment if you don't get it, because it's whole within itself. When we are striving to fulfill certain things that are empty, like desire, because desire is constantly moving, constantly changing, constantly wants more, cannot be satisfied. When we are moving in those directions, we're never going to find peace. We're never going to find contentment. We're never going to find tranquility. Why? Because it's not there to be found. And people who are constantly looking at the world through their mind and through mind and desire can't understand that. They think there are solutions to all problems. And what happens in this crazy world of ours is people are creating problems that don't have solutions. They're creating situations that don't have solutions. And we are constantly, men are constantly trying to bring about solutions to these problems. And on an international context, the usual solution to many of these problems is war. And it's even inherent in a lot of the philosophies that war is necessary to accomplish what it is that they're going for. And the truth is, if you believe that that's what's necessary, if you believe that that's the path, you are doomed to living a life of emptiness that is unfulfilled, because whatever you get will not satisfy you. Whatever you get, you won't know what to do with, because the only thing that understands reality is truth. And the only thing that's involved in truth are God's qualities. And God's qualities don't go to war. They don't need war. They can separate themselves off from this insanity and exist by themselves, hidden in a peaceful, content, tranquil space. If God can't live in your heart, he'll find a heart to live in, but he doesn't insist that he has to live in your heart. And man wants to insist that we live here or we live there or we control this or we control that. And it's man's insistence that brings him to the brink of destruction, to the brink of sadness, to the brink of chaos, to the brink of difficulty understanding why things are the way they are. Accept and don't react. Use God's qualities in order to change things. Don't be attached to results. These are all contrary to the way most men act. Being not attached to results is a very difficult space for people to be in because we're so result oriented. I studied and studied and studied and only got a B. Well, so what? Next time, who knows what'll happen? And in the end result, what difference does it make if you got a B or an A, other than in your own head? We need to be able to make peace with ourselves, and then we can make peace to the world. And what happens is that since we've been children, we have picked up lots of habits and lots of ideas that make it difficult for us to move forward in the world. We've picked up religious differences. We've picked up national differences. We've picked up color differences. And we've picked up quality um, deviations. For instance, if as a child um, you find yourself in a situation that you're abused, people who are abused have two ways to go. They can either feel ashamed of the fact that they're being abused, or they can become angry of the fact that they're being abused, because anger is an easier emotion to carry than shame. Or you can get over it and move on with your life and not have any of these emotions. For the most part, we need to be able to do away with emotion and deal with truth. God is not emotional. God is direct. God is kind. God is loving. God is just. God has no differences. God sees everyone equally and gives his love equally to everyone. We have to get to that place. So until we are beyond our own mind and desire, until we are beyond our own emotional upheavals, we are going to continue to run into situations that we think need some kind of resolution. Because everyone thinks that things need resolution, we've had all these philosophers who've come up with different utopias. And they say to us, if you do this, then we will set up a utopian situation and everything will be fine. Communism was supposed to be a utopia. How'd that work out? And Cambodia was trying to create a utopia. How'd that work out? North Korea is trying to create a communist utopia. How'd that work out? There are no utopias. There's only you and your relationship with truth and whether or not you can resolve your situation with truth, which means each of us has to go into our hearts and understand the nature of godliness. Each of us has to go beyond our mind and desire and understand the nature of godliness. And one of the points about godliness is God doesn't need anything. God doesn't need other people to like us. God doesn't need other people to agree with us. God doesn't need consensus. God knows the truth and acts on the truth. So we have to get to the point within ourselves where we are comfortable with our decision-making process and comfortable with understanding the truth and understand that this truth is not oriented towards certain results. It's just oriented towards acting appropriately. The results will come along as God intends. What we have control of is the appropriate action, and we have to act appropriately. And acting appropriately means that we have to give up self-motive. We have to give up the egocentric self. We have to give up I, me, mine, and we have to be capable of doing service to others without thought of ourselves. And this is a lot to gather together. But if we can gather all of this together, we can become content. We can become peaceful, and we can act from a content, peaceful place. But it takes time to develop in that way. It takes time to move forward in that way. It takes time to be satisfied without being attached to results. It takes time to understand that you can be satisfied just by doing God's qualities, by acting with God's qualities, by incorporating God's qualities into your being. Marriage is one of the places where it becomes a testing ground for all that we've learned. Now, the world is certainly a testing ground for all this, but marriage is the closest relationship that you're going to have in the world for a lot of reasons. One of them is you're together more than you are with anybody else because you've made a household together. So within marriage, you begin to know everything there is about the other person. After a while, there's no hiding anything anymore. Everything comes out into the open. Now, the questions become, can you handle that? Can you handle the deep secrets of somebody else? And can you handle them knowing the deep secrets about you? Well, the deep secrets that we have are probably the things that we have to get rid of. So part of marriage is an exercise of detaching ourselves from all of our opinions and all of the things that we hold dear that create a difficulty between ourselves and our partner. In order to have peace in the home, in order to have a union that works, there has to be a joining. In the same way that man is to surrender to God, a husband has to surrender to his wife, and a wife has to surrender to her husband. And it can only be done through God's qualities. So when we get together in marriage, the first thing we have to understand is there can be no resentment. We can't hold grudges. Everything has to pass and pass quickly. We're not allowed to get angry at our spouse. It doesn't accomplish anything. It doesn't work. What we have to do is learn how to be kind. One of the simple methodologies for creating a kind space is, as opposed to calling each other by name, you call each other sweetheart or honey or darling all the time. In doing that, you create a space that, at least externally, seems safe and loving. And as you create the external safe space, you then go to the internal safe space. You should both be conscious of the fact that truth is what sets you free, and truth is what keeps you together. So you can't have secrets from each other. You can't be compartmentalized. You can't have this section for the world, this section for the house, this section for the family, this section for strangers. You need to become a consistent personality that stays the same no matter what the external circumstances are. And your spouse has to become a consistent personality who stays the same no matter what the circumstances are. When I approach my wife, I have grown confident in the fact that her reaction is always going to be kind and positive. I know what's going to happen. Now, because I know that's what's going to happen, it makes it very easy for me to approach her. Likewise, she knows that whatever situation she puts me in, my reaction towards her is going to be kind and positive. So she has no trepidation about bringing anything up to me because she knows my reaction is always going to be the same. So the question is, does this have to do with them or does this have to do with ourselves? Are they the ones who make us kind and positive, or do we make ourselves kind and positive? Do they make us consistent personalities, or do we make ourselves consistent personalities? Realize it's always about you, and it's always about working on yourself. It's not about changing your spouse. Your spouse is going to change when you change. Your spouse is going to see how you are and become like you, and vice versa. So if you want change to come about, change yourself. If you want kindness to come about, be kind yourself. Someone once said to me, I don't know. I don't seem to be able to get into loving relationships. And my response was, you're not lovable enough. You have to become lovable. You have to become such that you are capable, or people are capable, of loving you. You have to establish your own personality in such a way that it's easy to be around you and that you are consistent in your reactions, and that constantly everyone can expect a certain reaction from you, especially your spouse. We spent a lot of time going to see the sheikh, and we spent a lot of time being with the sheikh. Why? Because to be in his presence was to be in the presence of love. And to be in the presence of love is healing and soothing and brings peace into our being. So, who are we? What is it like to be in our presence? What is it that we bring forth? What is it that we offer? Do we offer kindness? Do we offer compassion? Do we offer mercy? Do we offer justice? Do we offer peace? Do we make it easy for people to be with us? Or are we demanding? Are we overbearing? Are we angry? Are we all of those things that are other than what we should be? To do this, we have to be in a state where we analyze ourselves. So we have to create an honest watcher within ourselves who watches our own actions and who watches what we do and who understands what it is that is positive about us and what it is that is negative about us. And that which is negative about us is something that we have to get rid of. And we've been given a gift to help with accomplishing this. And it's called the third kalima. And I'm going to recite it. Subhanallahi walhamdulillahi wa la ilaha illallahu wallahu akbar wa la hawla wa la quwwata illa billahi wa huwal aliyul adhim. And essentially it means all praises of God, all praises to God. There is nothing unto God. There is nothing greater than God. There is nothing comparable to God. And only God can do the things that need to be done. We'll probably work something out where we can send copies of this around. But the point is, this is known as the kurban for our bad qualities. Kurban is the knife that the butcher uses to slaughter meat, to slaughter animals to make meat, and it's halal, which means it's permissible. So this cuts our bad qualities, and reciting this cuts our bad qualities. And it's been given to us purposefully to help us with our bad qualities. And we all need help with our bad qualities. So God has said to us in his mercy, I will assist you in doing away with your bad qualities. And he's given us a formula to recite to help do that. And this is the formula. So we need to memorize this recitation, and we need to do it in 33s. And we need to do it whenever we feel overwhelmed by the things that are going on around us, when we feel overwhelmed by our emotions, when we feel overwhelmed by the problems that we're facing. We believe that we can solve our problems. And that doesn't mean we shouldn't try to solve our problems. But we should also know that God's solution is always going to be better than any solution we come up with. And the interesting thing about God's solution is we can't think of it, and we don't know what it is at this moment. So have the expectation that God has a surprise for you. He is going to bring about a solution that is so much more sublime than anything you can think of, that it's going to bring peace into your heart. And use this recitation in order to bring yourself to a state of peacefulness that will allow that to happen. In marriage, we shouldn't be afraid. We shouldn't be afraid to enter into marriage, and we shouldn't be afraid to work on the relationship in marriage. And we shouldn't be afraid to expect kindness from our spouse. We shouldn't be afraid to expect mercy from our spouse. We should treat our spouse the way we want to be treated. And this is the general golden rule for humanity: do unto others as you would have them do unto you. But it applies in the highest level to your relationship with your spouse, because this is the crux of humanity. Humanity is based on the relationship between husband and wife. Humanity is based on the marital relationship. It is the core relationship in our existence. And we have to come to realize the nature of that and the fact that this relationship is the training ground for our relationship with God. It is said that when you leave this earth, you go on to your marriage with the Creator. Well, you have your marriage on earth, then you have your marriage with the Creator. This is the training ground for that marriage. When I do weddings, I usually give a talk afterwards. And one of the things I say to the husband is, when on the day of judgment, they make the decision as to whether or not you are worthy to move forward into what's considered paradise, the first person they ask is your wife. And that usually brings about a groan and a laugh, depending on who you are. But the point is, think of it like that. This marriage relationship is so powerful that God wants to know what went on in the middle of it and how you treated each other in the middle of it. In order for a blade to be able to be used, it has to be sharpened. But you can't test that blade on yourself because you'll end up cutting yourself. Like that, be very careful. We have to walk through this path, and it's a narrow path that we have to walk on. But for an ant, a narrow path is a bridge. It's said that this path is as narrow as the edge of a knife, but an ant can walk across the edge of a knife and can do very well getting from one side to the other. We need to be careful in our life. We need to be careful about not hurting others. We need to be careful about not inflicting pain on others. And we have to be careful with ourselves. And the way we are careful with ourselves is not to be over judgmental about ourselves, but to set ourselves a straight course, set ourselves a straight intention, and do a little bit more every day. Bawa talks about the dog of desire, and he says what you have to do with the dog is put it on a chain, and every day wind that chain once around the pole that it's on, and pretty soon you've pulled it all the way in so it has very little room to roam. The dog of desire in us will always try to roam and look for that which is degraded. We have to control that attitude within man to look for that which is degraded. We have to look for that which is transcendent. And we have to know the difference between what's transcendent and what's degraded. We have to know the difference between what's right and what's wrong. And we have to be very honest about that. And that's the first step in entering the true path, is leaving that which is wrong and only taking on that which is right. This will take us in the straight path. If we are constantly in a state of doubt, then doubt leads to degradation, it leads to chaos, and it leads to confusion. And it takes us to the point where we don't know the difference between right and wrong, so we accept everything as right. And what's going on in the world right now, especially in this country, too many things are accepted as right that just are outside of the realm of appropriate. Appropriate and inappropriate are almost words that we don't use anymore. If it makes you feel good, do it. Well, that's not the truth. The truth is there is right. The truth is there is wrong. And we have to know the difference. And we have to work at doing what's right. And then we have to work at getting beyond the intellect and beginning to interact from our heart. And if we have the true qualities in our heart, then we will interact from a transcendent point of view. That transcendent point of view is known as wisdom. Wisdom will take us to the truth. Everything else will leave us behind. So we have to work at bringing God's qualities into our being and into our actions. And we have to pray that God makes it easy for us and God allows it to happen and God takes us on the straight path and the path towards Him and the path towards true knowledge. It's there for us. And man is capable of being in that place. I've seen it. I've seen transcendent beings. I've seen them and I've seen how they act. And the what I came away with is I want to be able to be like that. So we have to set that intention. We have to want to be like the transcendent beings in this world. We have to want to be like the ones they call the holy ones, the saints. I want to be in that number when the saints come marching in. That should be our intention. And may God fulfill that intention for each and every one of us. Ameen. Ameen. Ya Rabbil Alameen. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah wa barakatuh.